movie, film, movie, film.
But what's the difference?
Well, technically, a movie is defined as a story or an event that is captured on a camera, using a series of pictures that is shown in a theater or on a television. Moving pictures, as it were. A movie. Film, on the other hand, is a thin strip of plastic or other material that's placed inside a camera. It has light-sensitive emulsion coated on it for the exposure, and it's used to create photographs or motion pictures. But why do we use the word film as though it meant the same thing as a movie? I mean, some film buffs might think that using the word film sounds more prestigious than using the word movie, but technically the word movie comes from the term moving pictures, which could be considered more accurate than the term film, since its meaning is exclusive to a movie, whereas film can refer to a movie, a film strip, or simply a thicker surface than what lies underneath. But still, both are English words, and in this instance, both are technically used to refer to mostly the same thing. So, why do we have two different words for it? A lot of this has to do with how we tend to use the English language in modern day. We're used to having two different words for labeling the same basic thing. We have a word for sheep, and a word for the food that the sheep turns into, mutton. But not many other countries have this duality in their language. The same word that they use for the animal when it's alive tends to be the same word they use for it when it becomes food. Now, a lot of this has to do with the fact that modern Middle English is not made up entirely of English words, or at least not made up entirely of Germanic words from which the English language comes from. Instead, it comes from a bunch of other different languages, mostly French, Romantic languages. Now, whereas scientific terms are derived from the Greek and the Latin languages and are used all over the world, most languages tend to borrow less words from other languages in day-to-day speaking, even when it comes to naming their own children. For example, I am a modern Middle English speaking American, and my name is Stefan. But Stefan really isn't a word that's commonly used in modern Middle English speaking people. Sure, just like the rest of the Germanic language, Stefan is Germanic in origin. It comes from a Greek word, Stephanos, that means crown. Its full modern English evolution becomes Stephen or simply just Steve, even though neither of those words are really that common in modern Middle English day-to-day speaking. But in fact, the word crown does not come from the Germanic language. The differences between the Germanic languages, which English comes from, and the Norse language is what gives us the names for foods that are different from the names of the animals they come from. See, the Norse invaded the Anglo-Saxons in the year 1066, and the Norse would use their own French-derived words to describe the animals they were eating, like beef or mutton. But the farming Anglo-Saxons still used their Germanic words to describe the animals they were eating, such as cow or sheep. In fact, my name's meaning, crown, is a French-derived word in and of itself. The Anglo-Saxons might have called what the Norse rulers wore on their head a Stefan, whereas the Norse would instead have called it a corone, which is where we get our Middle English word crown. Other Middle English names, however, do come from Middle English words. We have names like hunter, chase, joy, hope, grace, lovejoy, and so on. But these Middle English words as names happen sparingly in our culture. For example, here's a character in a Japanese TV series named Shinji. Now, in Japan, the name Shinji comes from the word Shinji, which, when fully translated into English, means believe. So if someone in this Japanese TV show were to say, Shinji doesn't believe in his father,
信じられないの？お父さんの仕事が。
当たり前だよ。あんな父親なんて。
they are literally saying belief doesn't believe in his father.
Now, for an English speaker to hear that sentence fully translated might be compelling because the name is also the word being discussed. But the Japanese have been used to their words also being names for a long time now. It may not even strike them as odd or even all that clever.
大丈夫か
起動確率は 0.000000001%。
But if I were to name a character in a script Hope, and have another character say Hope isn't very hopeful, then that could be seen by an audience as kind of clever. Hope means hope. And since English speakers don't usually hear their own language used in this way, the novelty of the sentence, hope isn't very hopeful, might come off as clever to certain people watching, or that novelty might come off as just kind of lame to others. Because of the otherwise inherent duality of words in our use of modern English, Western art and literature tends to adopt this theme of duality as well. I mean, sure, Eastern literature also explores the concept of duality to a certain extent, but that exploration is far less abundant in their culture as it is in a Western culture. Or at least it's not explored in the same way as it is in our Western culture.
美里さんの心の中にいる僕の心ですよ。
と同時にシンジ君の中にいる私の心というわけね。時田君を放っておけない。だって私
Because we have two words for the same basic things, this idea of having a dual identity or a dual personality infused itself in a great many of our works. We have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Phantom of the Opera, whose real name is Eric, and the character Larry Talbot, who becomes the Wolfman. This sense of duality has even crossed over into the modern era.
I am not the Dread Pirate Roberts, he said. My name is Ryan.
Though this time, rather than only the villain or the monster having the alternate identity, we have included heroes as well. We have the Shadow as Kent Allard, the Phantom as Christopher Walker or Christopher Standish, depending on which version you're reading, and in more recent memory, Kal-El as Clark Kent or Superman, Bruce Wayne as Batman, Peter Parker as Spider-Man, and Thomas Anderson as Neo.
Whoa.
In fact, very few characters conventionally thought of as superheroes go by only one name. Just look at the Avengers movie. Even non-superpowered characters like Tony Stark, Natasha Romanoff, and Clint Barton have their own duality in the names of Iron Man, Black Widow, and Hawkeye respectively.
Phil, come in.
Phil? I can't stay.
His first name is Agent.
With only the characters Thor and Loki representing themselves with their true identities. In Japan, however, characters like Goku or Tetsuo never felt like they had to change their names after unlocking certain superpowers like Peter Parker had to.
僕は鉄夫。
In fact, as Americans, we can't seem to identify well with certain characters who have something more than what we have, unless those characters use a different name to refer to themselves as having those things.
Nice car.
You should see my other one.
I'll get my car. I brought mine. Yours. I gotta get me one of those.
So when you go to see a new comic book movie, know that you're participating in a very small aspect of Western art inspired from the use of the English language that's contemporary to its writing. Almost like a modern-day Shakespeare play, as it were.